We're going to be learning today, December 4th, which is also the 10th of Kislev, the day on which the Middle Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, of Lubavitch, came out of his incarceration, and it affected him so strongly that he didn't make it to the first anniversary of his freeing from the Tsarist prison, and he passed away a day before. He was so frail afterwards. He was only 56 years old when he passed away on the 9th of Kislev the year after. So today we're going to be starting Parashat Vayishlach. And we're going to be learning about one of the first verses in this parsha that the Rebbe speaks about. And when Yaakov is coming back from Haran, from the house of Laban, his father-in-law, he travels towards the land of Israel, and he sends messengers. Sends messengers to Eisav, Esau, his brother, wanting to make peace. Because the whole reason he had fled to Haran was because Esau wanted to kill him after he had taken away the blessings that Isaac wanted to give Esau originally, right? So he sends messengers, and he has a message for him, and his message is, as we'll see, I've lived with Laban as a stranger, and I have kept during that time 613 mitzvos. As we'll see, we'll see how that actually works into his message. The first thing to know is that Rashi says that the messengers that he sent, the word for messengers in Hebrew is the same word as angels. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim. So Rashi says that these were actual angels. What does that mean even? Like, how would you even interpret something like that? Actual angels. How do you have angels at your disposal?
Good guys can do anything.
So the easy way is to say, it's all miraculous anyway, but no, you have to bring it down to something that's more concrete. And one of the signs that you have to do that is that the Maggid of Mezritch, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, who founded the Hasidic movement, he says that when Rashi says actual angels, so the word he uses is malachim mamash, actual angels, mamash. But the Maggid says that mamash means he sent the external aspect, the mamashut of the angel, but not the content of the angel. Meaning it's like he sent the vessel, but he didn't send the light. Why? Because he said that the light would not do well with Esau. Would have a real problem. So that in itself is what? Now you're telling me it's not just angels, but we're going to discuss which part of the angel he sent? But if the Maggid is saying something like that, it means that there is a serious discussion here about what it means to send an angel. A serious discussion in the sense that we don't just say it's something miraculous, but we have something to say about it. That you send the external aspect and not the internal aspect. So what in the world does that mean? How would you understand something like that? So this is even before getting into what the Rebbe is discussing, because what the Rebbe is discussing is with all this in the background. So how would we understand that you'd send the external aspect, not the internal aspect? Well, the simplest way of understanding it is that this whole parsha is describing our interaction with Esau, who eventually, according to the sages, becomes the representative. He's succeeded by the Roman Empire, and then succeeded by Christianity. He's the progenitor of Christianity. So he says this idea that you send the external and not the internal aspect is essential to understanding how things are understood by the Christian world. It's like how they understand our whole, everything we have to say, because what are we sending? We're sending the Torah, as we'll see in a moment. That's exactly what Yaakov is sending, the message. I have lived with Lavan. And the word lived becomes 613 commandments. I lived with Lavan and I've kept 613 commandments. And that's like the message that we're sending to the Christian world. Look, the most important thing we have to tell you is we've been through this terrible exile. Jacob's exile wasn't so terrible, it was only 20 years, it was a single person. But we've been through 2,000 years of exile. And our message to you is that we've kept 613 commandments. And we're sending you the vessels and not the inner light of it. Why? What's going on? Because there's an understanding here that that is their issue. Their issue is that they think they understand the inner light, but they've never caught on to the vessels. They don't understand the meaning of living a life that is governed by commandments. They've never been able. That was the first thing they got rid of. They said, "Oh, it doesn't matter anymore because what's important is the meaning behind it all. It's the spirit, not the letter." So the message is first and foremost. That's what the Maggid is saying. I have to send you the mamashut, the actual actions that govern these commandments. Otherwise, I'm not sending you any kind of message. Because otherwise I'm no different than you. Then what have I done differently? And that's like a backdrop to this whole discussion. Okay, so really it's about how do you keep mitzvot? How do you become governed by God in a very real way, in a very real day-to-day way? Okay, so let's now read what the Rebbe says about this. The beginning of this week's Parsha tells the story of Jacob sending out messengers to greet his brother Eisav. When Jacob sent the messengers, he instructed them to tell Eisav, Im Lavan Galti, I have lived with Lavan as a stranger. The word as a stranger is derived here from the word lived, because Galti means you can live with someone in a number of different ways. You can live as a permanent resident, and you can live as a foreigner. So he basically lived as a foreigner. He was never at home in Haran. He was never at home in Lavan's house. Rashi explains this to mean V'taryag mitzvot shamarti, and I have kept the 613 commandments. The word galti has the same letters as taryag, which is the numerical value of 613 in Hebrew. Right? There's a very important thing about this that he's saying that. We'll skip that. We'll discuss that some other day. A few concepts from this scenario require clarification. First of all, what is the connection between the way Rashi interprets the pasuk, the verse, and the way it would be read on a literal level? Like that's not the verse is not saying anything about keeping commandments. So how can Rashi make this? It's a very nice trick of gematria, but it's not connected to the literal, the plain meaning. And Rashi is a plain meaning interpreter. So how in the world does this actually mean that commandments are somehow related to living as a foreigner? Why is that even connected in the first place? Why would you bring this drush, this homiletic explanation? Because I lived with him as a stranger. It has nothing to do with 613 commandments. That's a trick that you do with the word galti. You take it to gematria and you get 613, and then you say, "Oh, this is a hint at the commandments." So first of all, what is the connection between the way Rashi interprets the verse and the way it would be read on a literal level? Secondly, why did Jacob find it necessary to inform Eisav that he had been fulfilling the 613 commandments? And finally, what lesson can we learn from this episode? So we sort of touched upon the second question here. Why would he be discussing this with Eisav in the first place? Well, because that is the issue with Eisav. That is the central issue of keeping commandments. And what we'll see later on is that if you don't live as a stranger, you don't have motivation to keep commandments. Meaning there's a problem with the way that the Christian world lives its life. It's how they see life, that they assume that life means that I'm a permanent resident here. And you can't do commandments if you think you're a permanent resident in this world. There's something wrong with that, with their whole outlook about life. There's an error in it. When Jacob told Eisav, "Im Lavan Galti, I've lived with Lavan as a stranger," he was informing Esau that any connection he had with Lavan, who represents physicality, was merely temporary and superficial. He never settled there permanently, and never became comfortable or satisfied in Lavan's house. His soul and the Torah and commandments remained his home. So he wasn't living in the physical reality of Lavan's house. That's why he was always a stranger. Not because he was treated just as a stranger. Even if Lavan would have embraced him fully as his son and greeted and given him everything and made him feel perfectly comfortable, Jacob, of his own accord, does not want to feel that way in the physicality of this world. And we said the Haran, where Lavan lives, is a symbol for the physical aspect of reality. It says, Charon af shel makom. It's a place where there is no spirituality. Everything is just a physical level of existence. This applied to his attitude towards worldly possessions in general as well. Jacob didn't feel as if they were his real life, rather galti, as a stranger, a foreigner. This is why the verse says, "And he, Jacob, built for himself a house, and for his cattle he built huts." For himself, that is for his neshama and all of his spiritual needs, he built a permanent home. But for the cattle, that is all of his physical belongings, things that are bought and are not part of who he really is, he built only huts. So that's how he understands Sukkot, and that's exactly what we do in Sukkot, right? We take ourselves out of our house, and we come and we say our physical possessions are temporary. We live in a temporary dwelling, and we celebrate the fact that during these 7 days that we're in the Sukkah, and that's when we connect with Hashem through our soul. Because it's exactly when the physical reality of the world is considered temporary that you can strengthen, you can focus upon the spiritual aspect of reality. But it means that you have to have a sense of physical reality being temporary. If you don't have that, if you feel entirely at home in this world, if you feel entirely that what I'm looking for is my material possessions, you can never come to truly uncovering and living with your soul. And it's either or. It's either the body or the soul in this sense. Not in the sense that you don't have to take care of the body, but you have to take care of it as someone who's a foreigner. That it's never comfortable. It's never exactly right. And by the way, that's when most people meet God in one way or another, meet their soul, is unfortunately when their body's not working so well. And then they suddenly realize, wait a minute, life is not about another steak. It's not about another meal. It's not about another possession. It's about something entirely different. But to be able to break through that facade of life, that it seems to you that what is permanent is the physical nature of life, you have to weaken the body. There has to be a certain sense in which the body seems temporary suddenly. Okay. These are considered superfluous items, since the neshama, the soul, essentially has no need of them. Okay, all the physical. The Frierdiker Rebbe once repeated a saying in the name of the Maggid of Mezritch. What was the saying? Only when one is at home must he be certain that he has everything. When one is on the road, however, it is not so necessary for him to have all the worldly possessions he owns, such as his furniture. Where did this come from? It's from a famous story, right? That the Baal Shem Tov sent a chassid of his, in the process of bringing the Maggid closer to the Baal Shem Tov, he sent him different emissaries from time to time. And one of these emissaries went to him. He was a very wealthy man. He was a merchant, and he went to his where he was living at the time. I don't remember what the name of that village was. I forgot what it was called. But it wasn't Mezritch. He was living somewhere else at the time. And he searched for him until he found his house, And he went into and he knocked on the door, and they invited him in, and he sees that there's nothing there. Like literally, this house has nothing. There's no furniture. There's nothing at all. And they invited him in, and the only table there was with 2 chairs, the Maggid was sitting on with his books and with his study partner, and they were learning all day. And there was no food, there was nothing at all. And at night they said, look, we don't have anything to give you to eat, but we can offer you hay to sleep on. So he accepted. They turned the chairs over, and that in some way provided them with some kind of, I don't know how they made it into like a pillow or something. I don't know what they do with it. And the table also, the same thing. They slept on the table. Or the kids slept on the table, something like that. And he couldn't believe the poverty that he was seeing. Because the only thing that he did all day was he learned. So in the morning he told him that he was sent by the Baal Shem Tov. And he said, and I find it very difficult to understand, how can it be that the Baal Shem Tov holds you in such high esteem, and you have nothing at all? So the Maggid said to him, I'll explain to you. You're a merchant, right? So when you leave your home, do you take your kitchen sink with you? Do you take your furniture? Do you take this? Do you take that? He says, no. He says, why? Because when I'm on the road, I do with a lot less than what I have at home. So he says, I too am not at home. My home is where my soul is. The soul is from the Garden of Eden, from the throne of glory of God. That's where my home is. There I have furniture. I have everything I need. Down here, I'm just a merchant. I've come down to buy Torah, to purchase learning. And so here I don't need all the possessions that I have above there. Right, so that's where this statement came from. I'm sure you know that story. The idea is that when one views physicality as merely a temporary phase and not as his permanent home, he won't be so particular about every physical detail. So why is this Jacob and Esau? Because that's exactly what they argued with. That's what the sages say they argued about in the womb. They argued about whether they wanted this world or the next world. And Esau was very definitive. He wants this world. Because this is where, what does it mean he wants this world? It's not just to inherit it. It's also to where do I feel comfortable? He said, I'm going to feel comfortable in this world. And Jacob said, I want the world to come. What does that mean? That you're not going to have a life in this world? No, I'm also going to live in this world. But my permanent place of residence is the world to come, not here. I also live here. I'm also going to go through life, and I'm also going to have my challenges and everything else. But I'm going to go through all of it with the understanding that my permanent place of residence is not here. And that's the big difference between them. This is the connection between the literal reading of the verse and the way Rashi interprets it. Jacob was telling Esau that the entire time he was living in Lavan's home, he remained strong and steadfast in his observance of all the commandments. How did he do this? Because he lived there as a stranger. He viewed the physical objects around him as temporary and unfamiliar. So they did not distract him. In this way, he was able to remain focused on Torah and keep the 613 commandments. So this is a very important principle. You can't, the reason that Christianity doesn't understand the commandments and never kept them is because, in essence, they favored physicality over spirituality. And when you do that, then you have no way to actually change reality and come and say that, oh, it's true that you have to wake up in the morning, but the first thing you're supposed to do in the morning is not what comes naturally. The first thing you do is you say Modeh Ani, and then you wash your hands. And then you start davening. You say a bracha on the hands, and you continue with the blessings and so on. And then you go to shul, and then you daven. You put tefillin on. That's not the thing a normal person does when he wakes up. He wakes up, maybe he cleans his face and so on, but then he sits down to the table to eat, to eat breakfast, and then he goes out to work. That's the normal way of a person who feels that this world, the physical world, is his permanent place of residence. But if the world is not a permanent place of residence, it can be shifted, it can be changed. It doesn't have to be exactly what it is. You're looking at me a certain way. So that's we got to 4 today. So God willing, we'll continue tomorrow. Because when? What do you mean 10? It's okay. So we'll continue tomorrow.
I don't understand.
We're continuing tomorrow?
Say that.
Good. 7:30.
Bezrat Hashem.
Okay, see you.